Good morning. Subcommittee will come to order. Today, the subcommittee will receive testimony in the posture of the United States Army. First, I'd like to welcome our two witnesses, Secretary of the Army Daniel Driscoll and General Randy George, Chief of Staff of the United States Army. Mr. Secretary, congratulations on your appointment. I look forward to working with you. General George, thank you for joining us once again. The U.S. Army is a force that remains the backbone of our nation's defense and the critical pillar in ensuring global stability. Today, we will assess the Army's readiness to meet the challenges of the increasingly complex security environment, particularly as we look toward future conflicts, including those that may unfold in the Indo-Pacific theater of operation, where strategic competition continues to intensify. The Army's role in the future fight is evolving rapidly, shaped by emerging threats and technological advancements. Among these, the proliferation of drone technology stands out as a game changer. Drone warfare offers both unprecedented opportunity and significant vulnerability. Our adversaries are leveraging drones to challenge traditional battlefield dynamics, requiring robust investment in counter-drone technology to protect our soldiers and maintain operational superiority. Modernization remains a cornerstone of the Army's transformation, and I commend the progress made in recent years through the next-generation combat systems, combined soldier lethality, and advanced network capability. However, progress must be matched by scrutiny. We must ensure that these efforts align with the demands of tomorrow's battlefield, where agility, resilience, and technological edge will define success. We must ensure that the investments in our Army reflect the needs of a multi-domain fight and strike the right balance between conventional capability and the specialized forces required for hybrid and asymmetric warfare. The Army has begun to implement a comprehensive transformation strategy to rapidly deliver capability, optimize force structure, and eliminate waste and obsolete programs. I'm interested in hearing how you will implement this strategy to achieve a more efficient and more effective Army. Today's hearing is an opportunity to address these issues head-on, to hear from our witnesses, and to chart a course that ensures the U.S. Army remains the world's preeminent land force. I look forward to a robust and insightful discussion. With that, I recognize the distinguished ranking member, Ms. McCollum, for her opening remarks.
Thank you for the courtesy, Mr. Chair. Mr. Secretary General George, welcome to the committee's discussion about the Army's plans to transform for the future. As the chairman pointed out, we're excited and interested in hearing your plans. As I said yesterday in our hearing with the Air Force, fiscal year 2026 budget process is off to a very rough start. We have just over 4 months left until the end of FY25, and the department still has not agreed upon a final spend plan with Congress. I know there's plans floating out there, but they haven't been agreed upon. The skinny budget for next year has been released, but we don't know what the numbers are based off of yet. These are rumors. The full budget may not even be released until June. All puts us in a very difficult position getting our job done. And I know both Ranking Member DeLora and Chairman Cole want to get our job done on time. And that's why yesterday we were unable really to discuss the Air Force and Space Force budget priorities in any detail. They just don't have the information. Likewise, it's disappointing that we're going to be unable to discuss the Army's priorities and programming details for FY26 at this time, and I know you share that concern. So I hope you will reach out to the committee, to the chair and I, with details as soon as they are released. Last week, you both presented the Army's transformative initiative, which will include changes to warfighting capabilities and force structure and program activities. And we do need to make changes. And I know you want to move quickly, very quickly. However, any successful transformation proposed by the services has only going to be made possible with an open dialogue with the United States Congress, the people of this country. That means you must work with us, with industry and with military communities involved. Bypassing any of these vital steps will only create questions and create delays, something I know you don't wish to have happen. And I know you want to put to rest any confusion, and I know it's not your desire to provoke anxiety. But not doing this in a forward, transparent manner could land up doing exactly that. So I look forward to hearing more details on the Army's transformation of initiative and how this differs from implementing the Army's 2030 initiative. What are the differences? So, Mr. Secretary, you also have proposals for agile funding, counter small unmanned aerial systems, network capabilities, civilian workforce decreases, and activities on the southern border. Your plate is full. So this committee needs to understand in depth the costs that will be associated with them. As I said yesterday in a meeting, a hearing that we had when reference to Golden Dome, this committee does not fund concepts. I don't do that in my personal life, and I do not do that with the taxpayers' money. So the sooner you have more details, the happier we all will be. As I said yesterday with the Air Force, I'm deeply concerned that cuts to civilian personnel will have detrimental effect on the executive execution of contracts and other vital paperwork. We are already living with the impacts of what happens when civilians take a buyout rather than to take a hand up to say that they'll continue to serve. What does that mean? It means contracts aren't signed on time, missions don't get done on time, and the program falls farther behind, and that means it will cost the taxpayers more money. I'm also concerned that these cuts will shift responsibility of completing these tasks onto the same military personnel that you would like to see out in the training field, and we would too. So again, I welcome you both to the committee, and I look forward to hearing your testimony. Mr. Chair, thank you again for the courtesy.
Thank you, and I appreciate your testimony. I'd like to now turn to the chairman of the full committee, my good friend Tom Cole. Mr. Chairman, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and let me begin with a couple off-the-cuff remarks and associate myself with my good friend, the ranking member's remarks in terms of just information. And look, we're very understanding. New administrations never meet the deadlines related. They can't. I mean, you don't have people approved and in place, so we understand. But, and I've had this discussion, and it's been a very positive discussion with OMB, and said the quicker you can get us this stuff, the better job we'll do. But the longer it takes, the more likely we are to miss our own deadlines and stumble into another CR or something like that. And we don't want to do that. I know you certainly don't want us to do that. And I do want to thank you, and you were kind enough to call. I know the chairman got a call. I assume the ranking member probably did too, to let us know a little bit about the transformative initiative and what you were releasing. Very helpful, but I too look forward to seeing more detail as that goes down the road. But I appreciate what I saw. I certainly didn't have any objections to what was laid out. I was very positive and very impressed. So again, thank you both for coming here. The hearing comes at a pivotal moment for our national security as we face an increasingly complex and volatile global landscape. Among the challenges before us, none looms larger than the rising threat posed by China. With its rapid military modernization, expanding global influence, and assertive posture in the Indo-Pacific, China presents a strategic challenge that demands our full attention and robust response. The United States Army plays a critical role in deterring this threat and, if necessary, prevailing in any conflict that may arise. Today, I look forward to hearing how the Army is equipped to address this challenge head-on. We must ensure our forces are postured to counter China's growing capabilities, particularly in the realm of long-range strategic fires. The ability to strike with precision over vast distances is a necessity to maintain our competitive edge and protect our interest across the globe. I'm eager to understand how the Army is prioritizing the development and deployment of these capabilities to keep pace with our adversaries. Equally critical is the state of our munitions inventory. Recent global conflicts have underscored the importance of a resilient and well-stocked arsenal. We cannot afford to be caught unprepared, whether it's ensuring an adequate supply of artillery shells, precision-guided munitions, or advanced missile systems. I know that you will provide us in this committee with a candid assessment of where we stand today and what investments are needed to bolster our readiness for both the near and long haul. Thank you again for being here, and I look forward to a productive discussion. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Driscoll, please take 5 minutes for your opening remarks. Thank you.
that every dollar that the United States Army receives from Congress contributes to the mission of defending the nation. I am committed to this because I am committed to our soldiers. They are the ones who will face the enemies of the nation. They will never quit, and they will never accept defeat. I ask that you join me in my commitment to their success. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
General George, please.
Okay, thanks, Chairman. Chairman Calvert, Ranking Member McCollum, Chairman Cole, distinguished members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to talk with you all today. I'd like to start off by saying that we're both extremely proud of our Army. We're proud of our troops that are out in the Indo-Pacific, on the southern border, in the Middle East, in Europe, and of everything our Army has done over the past year to respond to wildfires, floods, and a bridge collapse. We have formations all around the world conducting missions and exercises and innovating with our partners and allies. When not deployed, our units are conducting tough, realistic training at their home stations and our combat training centers. Our Army is a professional team that remains focused on its warfighting mission, and young Americans want to be a part of it. This is evidenced by our strong recruiting numbers this year. We have already met over 90% of our recruiting mission, and we still have our most productive months ahead of us. And while I'm proud of our Army, I also know we have work to do. I know the world is changing. Commercial technology is rapidly evolving, especially AI and autonomous systems, and this is impacting the character of war. We understand that we must transform to stay ahead of our adversaries, and we need to get better by 2026 and 2027, not 2030. Over the last year, using existing FY24 funding, some of our units transformed in contact, which means they experimented with changing how we train, fight, man, and equip while they were deployed or in training environments. This was a great proof of concept, and it confirmed that our formations are capable of rapidly improving their lethality. One transformation in contact brigade in Europe was 300% more effective in lethal targeting during their training exercise. Transformation in contact taught us some valuable lessons about what our Army should be buying and how we should be buying it, and we are just getting started. We are going to make the changes we can at our level so that we can continue to dominate the modern battlefield. For instance, we will cancel programs that are obsolete or not what our warfighters need. We'll develop and adapt war-winning capabilities and buy modular, open system architecture designs that can be iteratively updated. And we will cut and consolidate headquarters. For instance, we're going to reduce GO structure, cut 1,000 positions from the headquarters DA staff, and add in modern business systems that will make us more effective. And finally, we will power down authorities and funding so that commanders in our fighting formations have what they need to make their teams and their communities successful. What I've learned from being in this seat is that it is our job as leaders to do what we can with the budget that we have. I've been talking about the need for agile funding for UAS, counter-UAS, and electronic warfare. We need more flexibility with those and more. Technology is changing too rapidly, and we've got to be able to buy capabilities rather than specific programs so that we can always get our warfighters the best available tech and equipment for the modern battlefield. This is where we could use Congress's help. We are quickly approaching our Army's 250th birthday. This will defend has been our motto for 250 years, and I'm looking forward to celebrating our long legacy of duty. More importantly, our soldiers are ready today to defend our country, and we will do our part to ensure they have what they need to be successful in that enduring mission. Thank you for your support, and we look forward to your questions.
Thank you, General. I just wanted to emphasize what the ranking member and the chairman of the full committee pointed out, that our primary obligation, of course, is get these bills done, and we can't do that without information to do that. So hopefully that comes very soon, and I know that you have to work with OMB to help facilitate that, but we're pretty much at a standstill until we get this information, and we do not want to do another CR, so please help us from having that happen. Something we've learned on the battlefield in Ukraine is that horrific war continues. In the beginning, the primary ordnance was used, as you all know, as typical artillery 152, 155, and things have changed. Now drones have taken over the battlefield. The ongoing conflict in Ukraine has highlighted the proliferation of drones as a transformative element of modern warfare. Everything that moves pretty much dies on that battlefield. Both state and non-state actors have employed unmanned aerial systems for reconnaissance, precision strikes, psychological operations, demonstrating their cost-effectiveness and strategic value. Secretary Driscoll, I have a two-part question. Can you outline the Army's current investments in drone technology, including specific programs or initiatives aimed at matching or exceeding the capability we observed on the battlefield? And given the increasing sophistication of enemy drones in Ukraine, what steps is the Army taking to accelerate the development and deployment of counter-drone technologies such as electronic warfare, directed energy systems to protect our forces and maintain a tactical edge?
Chairman, one of the things we're doing is we are starting training on drones at the very beginning of a time a soldier joins. So I was at Fort Jackson last week, and these were soldiers who've been in the Army for 5 weeks. And one of the things I saw during the training is they were putting drones up, and as they were going through their lanes, what they were doing is trying to figure out what is the overhead, what is the concealment required to avoid being seen overhead. And so each of these soldiers, 5 weeks in, were building just incredible camouflage for themselves and their gear. And then what they were doing after they finished the lane is they were going and reviewing the footage so that they could say, what can a drone see from the sky? And this absolutely blew me away. And so what we are trying to do at a high level is push down these lessons that we are learning from Ukraine and from our men and women in our SAGU that are absorbing the lessons, get them to every or as many soldiers as we possibly can, and start to iterate and learn from them what works and what doesn't. We have 3D printers printing drones in a lot of our formations across the Army, and they are learning incredible lessons that are paired and piggybacked off what's happening in Ukraine. And then for how we're trying to get this into the hands of developers and manufacturers, we're inviting them into the field with our soldiers so they can capture these lessons in real time. And we are empowering units to purchase small numbers of these and test them and then pass the lessons up the chain of command.
One of the challenges, I know that you're very much aware of this, is that 90% of the components that are made for the drones themselves are made in China, including about 100% of the motors. What plans do you have to send to the manufacturing community as a buy signal to do something immediately on that?
Yeah, I agree with you, Chairman. Just back to your previous question, I mean, a lot of this is transformative. You have to change how you train and operate. That's just as important. Secretary mentioned that. We're going to have to change how we're organized. We're doing that. We're getting ready to go to the new mobile brigade combat teams. Those command and control nodes are 85% smaller than they were, just a couple of years ago. And then we do have to change how we buy things. This is a big reason why we're asking for, I think we need to buy capabilities. Brushless motors is exactly what you're talking about, and we need to have the flexibility that we're buying. We are buying off the blue list, so there is an approved list, so we're not buying, Chinese parts that go into our drones. I fully believe we can make a lot of this stuff. We can partner with industry to do these things. We're just going to have to approach how we buy things and be much more agile in our approach to do that, and I'm confident we can come over and share details of how we would do that, because I'm confident with American innovation we can get back on the road we need to be.
And Chairman, one of the things we're trying to do, and I talked about this in my confirmation hearing, is give a very strong demand signal to the American workforce, the American innovators, the American manufacturers. We, the United States Army, we will improve with this committee's help as a customer. We will expand the base of drone manufacturers who we are buying from in our own nation and from our allies. And what we hope and what we hypothesize is, with all of the outside funding that exists in the venture capital world, paired with small and medium businesses who are hungry to partner with us, we're going to open the aperture of partners, and we think the American defense industrial base will respond.
Thank you. Ms. McCollum.
Thank you. Gentlemen, last week you announced, as I said, the Army Transformation Initiative, and you called it a strategic approach to deliver critical warfighting capabilities, optimize the Army's force structure, and conduct program evaluation and better align with requirements. Totally agree with that idea. Totally agree with it. I am not here to protect the status quo. I am not here to slow things down when it comes to innovation. The chair and I have been working on that, and I credit his leadership and early thought on this. We work on this on everything. But I am going to address some of the things that have been released by the Army with some of the programs that there's a proposal to cancel. Because I won't speak for all the committee members, but I know the chairman and I and our staffs have fielded lots of phone calls and lots of questions. So, for example, the Brooker lightweight tank, which while accelerating the development of a new main battle tank, improving the improved turbine engine program, cutting the future tactical uncrewed aircraft system, the robotic combat vehicle program, and finally the joint tactical vehicle and Humvee. And I think you make some good cases for why these programs need to be reviewed, relooked at, phased out, or just cold cut as you're suggesting. But those come with a lot of questions and anxiety from people who are working on those programs and companies who've made investments in those programs. Not saying we shouldn't do it, but just saying let's put our thoughtful hat on here for a second about how we go about announcing and moving forward with some of this. So I just had breakfast with the Joint Chief just an hour ago, and we were talking about how we need to look at some of these manufacturing facilities and figure out how they can be part or work with some of the smaller companies and primes, retrain workforces and all that. So that needs to be part of the discussion we have up here. And then there was another thing that I just got the information back on yesterday. So cuts to the joint light tactical vehicle. Joint is the key word here. I was disappointed to find out that the Army had not coordinated this announcement with the cancellation of the program with the Marine Corps, who's part of the joint purchase. I'm curious to know why, or what you're going to do in the future to avoid these unilateral actions on joint projects, because whereas you might see this as a money savings, the Marines might need them, and we might see the Marines' cost per vehicle shoot through the roof. So we need to know on how the deliberative process, especially on joint, how you're moving forward with that. And of the remaining programs to end, if you could kind of tell the committee, or if you don't have it with you, there is a cost to close out. So this just isn't gonna, it'll save, I get your spreadsheet, it's saving money in the long run, but you're gonna have to spend money to close them down. So we would like to know what your estimated closeout costs. And then finally, when problems arose with the Air Force announced that they were ending the A-10 program, we all have our stories that we can tell about the A-10 and the battles on the House floor, the battles in the authorizing committee, the battles we had in the Appropriations Committee about that. And I'm a person who supported ending the A-10 program right away. I'm a person who actually supports BRAC, so I'm not afraid to talk about canceling programs or phasing programs out. But I need to understand better how you're going to work with Congress and work with industry, especially to ensure a soft landing for some of these Army programs that are going to be canceled, and how they fit, as I asked in my opening statement, how they fit into your 2030 initiative, or are we going to see a refresh of the 2030 initiative? Thank you.
Thanks, the gentlelady. Chairman Cole.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm, like my colleagues, very interested in the lessons that we're drawing from Ukraine. I've never seen anything transform our thinking quite so rapidly as that war, and as terrible as it is, it's certainly given us a chance to rethink our own force structure and what we ought to do. So let me start with you, if I may, Mr. Secretary. If you had to, pick the three things that have struck you the most, or you think we ought to be aware of as we think about refashioning the force, looking at Ukraine, what would those things, and to be fair, I'm going to ask General George the same question. I'm not trying to pitch you against one another. I'm just very, very curious about how what you're seeing, because we've traveled extensively. I've seen Ukrainian Patriot batteries training at Fort Sill in my district. I've been to Europe and watched Ukrainian soldiers training on NATO facilities and interacting with NATO soldiers, certainly with our soldiers in particular. And I'm just, enormously impressed by how much we're learning. But I'm curious how you would see it and how you would integrate those lessons into what you're doing now.
Absolutely, Chairman. So I think one of the first things is it's impossible to move. So the moment you're near the front lines, there are so many sensors that exist. The Army has for a very long time said, we own the night. And so we have a lot of our offensive capabilities were built around the fact that we own the night. That no longer is sufficient with drones and all of the other sensors. The moment a human or a thing starts to move, the enemy knows. The next one is technology lead. So when General George and I are talking about these platforms of the future, oftentimes we're referencing that they are software systems that are just manifesting in the world as hardware. What they will need to be able to do is be updated in near real time. So what we're learning from drones in Ukraine is they are updating the software and some of the hardware components on these drones every 2 weeks. Our best guess is that today, with our current systems, we might be able to pull it off in 18 months at scale. That is just not even, it is so far from sufficient for the modern warfare. And then the last one is just the speed of war. So the ability to have swarms of things, whether they're autonomous or human-led, is just making it so that the command and control layer that we're about to describe throughout this hearing and the digital layer that is going to be required to basically allow our people to sync with our things and sync with our sensors, that layer needs to be fast, it needs to be protected, and then probably in the future what it needs is it needs to be able to have some sort of generative AI models that can come in and help with things like targeting and all of these different things that human beings have done for a long time, but the speed has changed so quickly that humans are just not able to keep up, and it requires software solutions.
General?
I'm probably going to expand on a couple of things that the Secretary said. I think overall we're paying attention to this all the time. We get a lot of briefings back on this, talking to the Ukrainians. We're learning across every warfighting function. And if the one thing that I hear from our troops is that we're not moving fast enough. I mean, that's the feedback that I get and why we are, trying to move this forward and why we're talking about Army Transformation Initiative. I think the big thing is, well, the first one that the Secretary talked about, you cannot hide on the modern battlefield. We have to develop, systems that are lower signature. You're going to have to be more mobile. Everything is going to have to reduce their signature, and that's both visible and on the electromagnetic. We have to work that out. Second is on drones. Drones are going to be in every formation that we do. We're going to have autonomous systems in every formation. Whether it's to protect, detect, or attack, those things are going to be in every kind of formation. A logistics formation, an artillery battery that I know you're familiar with, everybody's going to have to do that. And that gets to training our formations up and down on how we're doing that. And that's what I mentioned, how we're going to have to change how we're organized, because we're going to have to be organized differently. And that's part of Army Transformation Initiative as well. And then I'll probably add one thing, just because the question came from you, Chairman, is just the efficacy of long-range fires, and I think we've seen that. I mean, Ukraine did not have, and this is using drones and long-range fires, did not have a Navy and what they were able to do with the Black Sea Fleet. So that's another area that we are working on very hard. We have to move very quickly in that area as well, and I think it was brought up about having magazine depth. That's the other thing that we are looking at and making sure that we can move quickly in that area.
Well, you anticipated one of my questions, which I was going to ask you specifically about long-range fires and what lessons you've drawn there, because I'm struck, just as Chairman Calvert was, about the transformation of the nature of this war in progress from what we saw at the beginning to this drone, the percentage of casualties now inflicted by drones on both sides. And honestly, I've been, and I'd love to be told you're wrong or whatever, so don't hesitate. But to me, just watching it as a non-professional and outsider, I've been shocked about how little conventional air power has played in this conflict. We've been able to fight without looking up for most of my lifetime. you got to look up on battlefields now, because it's not a jet roaring over your head that we can take care of. It's a small drone that's, not, it's low enough that we're not knocking it out with air power. So, and I've been shocked about, frankly, how little the advantage Russia would have in the conventional fight in the air has mattered on the ground in this particular conflict, partly because of drones, partly because there's so much more reach and long-range fires now than there used to be. But they're certainly not flying much over the skies in Ukraine, and obviously our Patriot people are part of that, but it's just, it's stunning, because it's a lot different than most recent conflicts. So I just, if you would, just quickly, General George, if you have any reflections on any of that, and I'd just love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, Chairman, I appreciate getting a chance to come back. I mean, I would, follow up. The list would be longer. It's hard to, to go down, stop at 3. You mentioned integrated air and missile defense. So the same reason that we're being really effective with long-range fires, we're going to have to innovate and move quicker. And again, this gets back to, we can't wait to 2030 or any of those things. We have to be moving out in that. We are doing that. When we talk about integrated air and missile defense, we should also be thoughtful of counter UAS. We're very focused on sense, decide, and act. So act can be kinetic or non-kinetic, but we have to innovate in each of those areas. So our sensors are going to have to be ubiquitous. We're going to have to look for cheaper sensors that are with every formation, because everybody is going to have to be alerted to that. And I don't care what, and I've talked to the other service chiefs, what service you're in, drones are going to be, out there, and long-range fires are going to be able to reach. And so we have to focus on that. So that's what we're attempting to do, and do that as rapidly as possible. What's a challenge, obviously, and a lot of the drones are dual use, and it's coming, we're seeing drones that can lift, big, heavy. We're going to use them in logistics. That is ahead, and what we need to do is make sure we're doing the same thing, that we have the same agility when it comes to counter UAS, so that we are maintaining pace with that threat that's going to be out there.
Thank you very much. Yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Secretary, do you have further comment?
Oh, I was just going to add, I think one of the things we spend a lot of time thinking about is, if it is true that Russia has manufactured nearly 1 million drones, we are an incredibly wealthy nation, perhaps the wealthiest in human history, but even we cannot fire $4 million kinetic weaponry at $800 drones for very long. And so one of the things, back to the speed of sharing information, that we need as a nation, is we need to be able to take down some drones with 50 cal rounds, because a 50 cal is pretty cheap. We need to be able to use directed energy at scale. That we are trying to make it so that we can envision a war, because many of the greater wars last a very long time, and we're going to need to be able to afford that war. And so in most of our decisions, what we are talking about as an Army is, how do we prepare to engage with a near peer or a peer for a very long time, and make the math work?
Thank you. Mr. Morelli.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, once again for hosting these hearings, and the ranking member, and thank you, gentlemen, for being with us today and for your service. I want to start, Secretary Driscoll. I represent Rochester, New York, which is home to Remade, which is a Manufacturing USA institute that specializes in remanufacturing. And I've seen firsthand how innovations in this space benefit the department, particularly the Army's use of remanufacturing to modernize aging Delta model Apaches into Echo models. The 10th Mountain Division at Fort Drum, which I know you're very well acquainted with, having served there, still operates the Delta models and is awaiting Echo replacements. I read, I think just in a memo last week from Secretary Hegseth's, a memo proposing the divestment of air cavalry squadrons, raising serious questions about the future of these aircraft. And I wonder if you can explain the justification behind removing the armored cavalry squadron from your combat aviation brigades, and what the Army's rationale is for taking nearly half, I think, of your Apaches out of the active component. I think that's for, if that's a more appropriate question.
Yeah, I'll jump in there on that one. And I think this goes back to what Chairman Cole talked about with, autonomous systems, where we're going with manned systems and just the amount of money that we spend on these systems. So we are going to take the AH-64 Deltas. They're twice as expensive as the 64 Echoes. We're going to keep some of the pilots that we have. We have great pilots, and thicken the lines with our maintainers. And so that's the plan that we're going to do, and we're going to invest that in autonomous systems. I think we're going to looking at autonomous systems, manned and unmanned teaming, and actually I think just because we've had, struggles with operational readiness rates of our AH-64 Deltas, that we're actually going to have a more ready aviation formation, and that's what we're after. But we're looking to the future. I mean, autonomous systems are cheaper. How do we find the right balance?
So do you expect that there won't, I'm sorry, Mr. Secretary.
Oh, Congressman, I was just going to say, I don't know that we know what the right mixture is. There's no obvious recipe for manned and unmanned and Apache versus drone, but we do know that it needs to be some sort of mixture, and we are overly weighted right now because of just how technology developed toward manned. And so a lot of these are corrections toward the future, and we would want to work with this committee as we are learning from soldiers and learning from what is occurring around the world to figure out that right mixture in spending.
We did,
So, and
we
it does
did
sou-
actually war game this as well. I will tell you that we've gone through this and we've done war games on it. We've done the analysis on it, and we're happy to have somebody come over and.
I would love that, so it does sound to me, General, that the expectation is that it would be Echo Apaches would be clearly preferred. I would just suggest that our ability, as I understand it, to remanufacture the Deltas into Echo models is far less expensive than new Apache Echoes, and so, but I'd love to have an opportunity offline, perhaps, to be able to have a further conversation about this, if that'd be all right.
Of course, Congressman, and we can look at the difference in spending and follow back up with your office.
Great, thank you. If I may, with my remaining time, General, protecting the health and long-term readiness of service members obviously is a top priority for all of us. We continue to see service members suffer traumatic brain injuries, particularly from blast overpressure events. And I know we've made some progress, but as I understand it, there remains no standardized field deployable device to monitor and record blast exposure in real time. And that leaves soldiers, I think, vulnerable to, leaves them vulnerable and underdiagnosed, as I understand it. So can you talk a little bit about the plan for accelerating development and deployment of reliable blast monitoring devices, and how we can help support what I think is an urgent
Sure,
need?
Congressman, this is something else I'd be happy to come over and
Yeah.
go into you in detail. So I just had, we're going down to our special mission units, and they're actually working, on this for us very specifically, resourcing them to go through this. So part of this is testing, and we're working through the testing to make sure that people, from the day you come in the Army, that you are tested and what this is. And everybody responds, as you would imagine, a little bit differently, just like we respond to physical things differently. I think the biggest thing is figuring out how we change the training. What kind of charges are we using? I mean, we're going to have to do the things that we're going to have to do to make sure that we're ready.
Right.
How can we adjust at training? And then we are all looking at everything from helmets, how are our helmets designed, what's the padding inside the helmets, what are the individual detectors? So I can go through that with you. And we have industry. Obviously, there's more people that are interested in this than just us. I mean, there's other folks, but we want to lead the way on that. We're working very closely with SOCOM and our special mission units.
I would also ask, because I understand it, I don't know if that a blast exposure and monitoring data is put into the long-term healthcare records of our warfighters. And I wonder if, and we could talk about this offline, but if you'd consider that as part of their health records.
So the testing that I mentioned, I think it's ANAM. So I hate throwing in an acronym here, but there is, because I don't know what the hell it stands for, but there is go through an online testing for that, and that is entered in everybody's record. So I have that, before I deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan, and all those things get entered into your record.
Terrific. Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Chairman.
you. Chairman Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome to the gentleman this morning. I bring you greetings from the men and women serving the country at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, home of the 101st Airborne Division and the Army's Air Assault School. With that in mind, I reviewed the Secretary's transformation memo, including the proposed end to Apache and Gray Eagle procurement, which would be a major shift. I support building a leaner, more lethal Army, but I have real concerns about maintaining aviation readiness and combat power. Ms. Secretary, what analysis or war gaming backs the decision to cut air cavalry squadrons? How are we measuring risk to lethality and responsiveness?
Congressman, as we told your colleague, one of the things that we have seen from looking at modern combat in Ukraine and around the world is manned aviation serves a purpose, and it will likely continue to serve a purpose for decades to come. But in the world of very cheap swarmable drones, it cannot be the only thing that we invest in. And so from our perspective, because we owe a duty and a burden of care to the American taxpayer and the soldier, we have to look at our resources that we are given, and we have to allocate them to different pots. And so when we look at what we need to invest in, we need to overinvest in UAS and underinvest in manned systems going forward to create a more sustainable ratio.
Ending Apache and Gray Eagle will leave a serious gap in our attack and recon capabilities. What new systems would replace those functions and when?
I'll jump in on that one, Congressman. So I mentioned in my opening statement that we had a brigade that was over in Europe, did not have Apaches. It was 300% more effective, had drones, had loitering munitions, long-range fires, and part of that is bringing, I think we have all those systems that can come on right now. And again, like this, my secretary said that when we show industry that we can do this with drones, I think that they will come out. The drones that we had in that 3rd Brigade that we did for transforming in contact were different from the first ones because they've advanced and we're advancing with it. I would say it's the same thing on Gray Eagle. We got, right now there's vertical takeoff and landing drones that are significantly cheaper and, you know, that have some pretty amazing capability, very similar capability. And I don't think what we can't afford is to have a company that is set aside, 150 people to run drones from an airfield when we can have a crew of 2 or 3 run a drone that could be pulled right out of the back of a truck or one of our utility vehicles and that can operate. So I think we can actually increase our lethality when we infuse our formations with this, and that's what we're seeing through our experimentation and what we're doing with transforming in contact. We just need to get that, we need to make these changes and get those things to our formations as soon as possible.
And Congressman, we intend to, the assets that this committee has funded for us and that we have, like the Gray Eagle, we want to continue to use them, and they do serve a purpose, the ones that we have. What we are advocating for is not purchasing any more, because there are a lot of solutions on the market that we think we need to be testing and spending on to figure out what works best.
We thank you both for your service to the country. Yield back.
Thank you, gentlemen. Mr. Aguilar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General George, thank you for the support that the Army provided in response to the wildfires. I know those of us in Southern California greatly appreciate the support. Mr. Secretary General, I, along with other members of the committee, are concerned about the implementation of the new national defense areas along our southern border, the transfer of land from the Department of the Interior to the Department of Defense without congressional approval. Mr. Secretary, can you walk us through what occurs when a soldier encounters a migrant in one of the national defense areas? how long is someone detained by soldiers before they're transferred to CBP authority?
The national defense areas, we, the United States Army, stand prepared to take them on when they are transferred to us. We immediately treat them like an Army base, which we have a lot of experience providing security coverage on. When I'm on Army bases, I've been traveling the last 75 days, you see armed security on all of these bases, and we look at the fact-specific around the base to figure out what level of security should we be providing. And so the Army is very well trained with this. We have 250 years of providing security on our bases. And then specifically to your question, Congressman, what the soldiers will do is they do not have law enforcement functions, and so they will hold them for a reasonable period of time if for law enforcement to come take over and do their functions.
What's a reasonable period of time, and what do those conditions or facilities, look like as they're being held?
As I understand it, Congressman, the reasonable test that occurs in many areas of the law varies based off the situation, and so our soldiers are incredibly well trained to not get outside of their duties, and they will be professionals every single time.
Can you give me one example? I know there's various, but can you give me one example of what it would look like?
Right now, we visited our 10th Mountain Division that's out of Fort Huachuca down on the border, and what they're doing is providing patrols and overwatch, and so they had strikers up on a hill, and they were looking through the equipment, and when they would see an illegal immigrant cross the border, they would call the Customs and Border Patrol. Those agents would then go interdict that person, and so we've been doing it for the last couple of months with no problem so far.
Is there any specialized training that the Army is giving these individuals to provide that overwatch in these new national defense areas?
So I think we're doing a lot of these missions that we do as far as doing security missions, patrolling, reconnaissance. These are things that we are trained at and very good at. Everywhere that we've been down there, and we talk almost every week to the folks that are down there that are doing this. It's a NORTHCOM mission, but there's a very close relationship with Customs and Border Patrol. Soldiers understand what their rules of engagement are, what they're supposed to do, and same thing, because this is a Department of Homeland Security mission, how they would handle that with them. So there's really close coordination, and honestly, I've had none of those issues have come up, and we talk to them quite a bit.
And Congressman, qualitatively, it's not quantitative, of course, soldiers seem to value the mission. They enjoy doing this. They think it's adding a lot of value. I think the partnership with the Customs and Border Patrol, I think when we've spoken to those agents, they have valued having soldiers, and it goes both ways. And so, at least from what we've been able to see, it's been working so far.
What missions are being delayed or diverted while this is made a priority? I understand that soldiers appreciate being active and being out there. What are we not doing by doing this?
I can't think of anything off the top of my head that we're not doing. I mean, it's an important mission, as Sec Army said. Our troops are excited to do this. I've talked to there's 2nd Brigade, 4th ID that's down there in 10th Mountain. Part of what we're doing, they're doing a lot of the missions that they would tend to have to be trained to do. We are also working with them while they're down there to make sure, again, back to the transforming in contact. What can we do to update their network while they're down there? They're learning a lot. They're helping us with the counter UAS mission. So, again, I think that's what we're trying to do. We're finding a lot of value in what we're doing down there.
Would the gentleman yield for a minute?
Yeah, I'll yield to the ranking
The
member.
20 seconds you have left. So you talk about training. When you're defending a military base, and that's been your description of this, whether it's at home or whether it's abroad, there's lethality involved. There is amount of intentional force that can be used that might not be lethal. And so the things that the Custom and Border agents don't necessarily do. So Mr. Aguilar asks a very good question. How long, how fast, and what kind of training's going on? Because the last thing I know the United States Army wants, because there's going to be language challenges and everything else, is for an unintended consequence where somebody is either seriously harmed or, hopefully this doesn't happen, but lethality is used. So I think it is an important question to ask, that Mr. Aguilar asked, and I didn't hear a good answer on what you're doing for training. Thank you, Mr. Aguilar.
Just real briefly, Mr. Chairman, sorry, I think asking the question about cost is also, important. That's why we're here. There's a cost to this mission. But with everything that this committee is focused on in Indo-PACOM, I just struggle to think what we're doing here in this new authority, in this new designation, how is it helping prepare us from an Indo-PACOM perspective? I think that's a concern that all of us should have. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, gentlemen. Mr. Womack.
Thank you. My thanks to Secretary Driscoll and General George for your service. Congratulations, Mr. Secretary, on your appointment, and you're off to a fast start, and we appreciate that. The common theme today has been the change that is being ushered in, and that change is out of necessity, in part because of technology and the changing concepts of war, as evidenced by what's going on in Eastern Europe, but also brought about by budget. We do have a lot of budgetary concerns, and there's no secret to the fact that the Army is a pay-for right now. It's one of the bill payers in this pivot that we've made to the Indo-Pacific region. And I'm not going to go too far into that. But in affecting the change, this transformation initiative is doing something that we may not agree with all the parts of it, but man, I applaud it, because as my old friend Sam Walton said in his 10th principle of success, swim upstream. In other words, get out ahead of change. And the Army's been clunky. The Army's been bloated, and the Army has not been very nimble over time. I mean, I think of programs like Comanche and FCS and Booker, and these are the kinds of things that we have to avoid because we're in a resource-constrained environment. So I'm going to ask you the question about risk, the risk of going through transformation and the risk of not going through transformation. I want to ask that risk question both ways, Mr. Secretary.
Congressman, as we view it, war in the last couple of years in human history has hit an inflection point. War will no longer look like what it has for the past 2 millennia, where it's driven by human beings. What we believe is war will likely continue to occur between human beings on land, where the Army thrives. But the tools that we need to empower our soldiers with in order to fight and overcome any enemy in war is going to require and is requiring a complete rethink of how we arm, train, and equip our soldiers. And so from General George and my perspective, I think to your point of risk, the risk is much greater to keeping the status quo, to allowing systems like Booker that were best intended and done poorly. And one of the things when we met with the Pentagon leadership was General George and I said, we got it wrong. We, the United States Army, have to own that. We've got to get our processes better. We have to be better partners for industry. We have to empower them with our needs and work with them along the way. We have to keep costs down, and we need to improve and own it. And so we're not proud of the outcome of the Booker, but what we are trying to do is not fall prey to sunk cost fallacy, where because we have invested all of these dollars into this machine that turned out to be inadequate, we're going to keep purchasing it. Instead, what we want to do is be completely transparent as we view truth with this committee and work with all of you and all of your experience across both sides of the aisle to make the Army as strong as it can be, so that when we send soldiers to combat in those first 6 months, what we are terrified of is if we don't do this Army Transformation Initiative, those first 6 months are going to be incredibly painful and heartbreaking, and then that's when our nation will make the changes.
Chief?
Yeah, Congressman, I think I agree 100% with Sec Army. The biggest risk here is not changing, and not changing fast enough. And again, everywhere we go, when we talk to our soldiers, it's like, okay, let's move out. And that's not the problem. They are very innovative. We've done this in the 101st, where they've completely transformed. They're ready to move out. I think the risk, all the challenges we're facing typically happen at a much higher level with people who don't want to change how we've been doing things. I think everybody knows change is hard. And that's where we're finding the biggest challenge, and I think we're going to have to drive this from the top down, and remember that our number one customer out there is the soldiers that are out there in our formation, and make sure that we stay focused on what they need.
It won't surprise any of my colleagues, nor will it you, that I'd ask a Guard question. I think the Guard brings value, particularly in a resource-constrained environment. We get a lot of benefit from our Guard, if we can keep them trained and ready. What does the future of the Army Guard look like in the formations that you are proposing with transformation?
I'll go first on that one, Congressman. I agree with you on the Guard, and when I go to talk to all the commanders at our pre-command course, I put up a big pie up there and show where everybody's from, and we're going to have to go as the whole Army. I mean, and that's been our history, and we got to make sure that we're ready. So this is all part of it for the Army Transformation Initiative. We need to transform those Guard units. It's going to be a little bit harder, but I will tell you that they're all in on doing this. We're looking at transforming, we'll announce there's 3 Armor Brigade combat teams that are going to be mobile brigade combat teams. Again, all they want is like, hey, how can we do this faster? How do we get this, technology into our formation and do it more quickly? We've done the same thing with the network. We're going to, they're going to have drones. We're going to have to do this across our formation. We need the Guard. They're still going to be the operational reserve for our country, and we need to make sure that we're transforming them at as fast a pace as we can.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, gentlemen. Mr. Quare.
Thank you so much. Let me, believe they asked a question about the southwest border. I'm from the border area. I live there. Tell me, traditionally, when the military goes down there, in the past, they've done more what I call support staff behind a joystick, watching cameras. I think there's a more important role on it from building river roads, because right now, if you have the river, the roads, Border Patrol will go this way, but they can't go across. So I'm looking at river roads. The famous Carrizo cane, I don't know if you're familiar with Carrizo cane. It's invasive type of plants that grow the height of this. And Border Patrol, it's on both sides of the river, but I'm talking about the American side. So Border Patrol can't really see. They can have cameras, but they can't, see through those. So eliminating that, just the very basic things that y'all could look at. And so do you have any ideas? I mean, I can give you a whole bunch of other ideas, from intelligence. The other thing we brought up at another meeting, the drug cartels just a couple weeks ago brought down a Border Patrol drone. And so now the bad guys have the ability to counter ours. And as I've said in the past, while we're going through all this procurement, all they do is they go to Best Buy, buy all their drones, they'll go back and they just have drones all over the place and watch what we're doing on this side, our law enforcement. So those are some of the areas, very basic things from river roads to Carrizo cane, to the interception of the drug cartels drones. Any thoughts what y'all can do? Because look, keeping the military at the border is expensive, very, very expensive. So if we're going to get the best bang for the dollars of the taxpayers, we need more than just sitting behind joysticks. And I'm not saying you're doing that, but in the past they've done that. Providing support staff for the military, for the Border Patrol, something that's a little bit more useful, I think, for folks that live down on the border for Border Patrol.
Congressman, we totally agree. And General George, when he said earlier, we talked to the leadership from 10th Mountain that are down on the border nearly every week, and what we have tasked them with is get lessons learned from this that can translate to how we create our formations for future conflict in Indo-PACOM and anywhere we send them, because what is going on with the cartels at the border is requiring our soldiers to do exactly what you're talking about, which is think about UAS, think about counter UAS, figure out best practices for taking a drone that was bought at Best Buy that can watch their movement, because again, we just cannot move without things seeing us anymore. And how do they operate in that environment? And so, and then to your offer of having suggestions for ways that we can improve and use the Corps of Engineers to help improve the border and help the communities on the border, we'd be delighted to see that list if your office has it, because I think a lot of your constituents will know things that we won't know, and we can learn from them.
I just would add, I'd love to get you down there with JTF Southern Border with General Nauman, who's down there. I think then if you had very specific input that you wanted to pass to him, beyond the cost, which I mean it's a mission that somebody has to do. I would say that we're very effective with that. And when we were down there for the very first briefing, right after 10th Mountain got down there. There is Customs and Border Patrol are working hand in hand. So, I mean, I think that's good. And we're sharing, it goes both ways. How we're communicating, how we're passing data, how we're getting after that, how we're leveraging technology. I mean, there's a new counter UAS system and software that we're doing. So again, we're trying to use this as an opportunity. There's areas that we need to improve on, and it's a good opportunity for us to do it.
Yes, and I like to, certainly I'll take your offer and invite any of the members be down there and give you some ideas that I think are very, very useful for Border Patrol, and love to sit down with you. I think you all have somebody in Laredo, a group of folks. I thought y'all had some folks there, and I've talked to them, but it needs to come from y'all, if you know what I mean.
Yes, sir. And then Ranking Member McCollum had referenced earlier the Joint Force. This is a different version of the Joint Force, but learning to work with the Border Patrol is testing our systems and testing our ability to get information to flow back and forth. And as we work to make that information go faster between these two independent forces, that will help make us stronger and better as we operate around the world.
And just to finish, some people think that the drug cartels are not very smart people, but when you got so much money, you can hire the smartest people, and they're an adversary. And certainly, love to sit down with you and any other member that likes to go down to Laredo. Mexican food is pretty good down there. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member.
Thank you, gentlemen, and a point well taken. The cartels, unfortunately, have been hiring a lot of former Mexican military personnel and using them. They're pretty well trained. Mr. Anderholt, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. Again, welcome to the subcommittee. And thank you for your testimony. Mr. Secretary, your submitted testimony regarding AMCOM, an organization that will be critical in the Army's role to Indo-Pacific. And we're very encouraged by that. But the recent memo suggested the merger of the Army Futures Command and Training and Doctrine Command into a single command. Given the urgency to modernize, as you have indicated, will this new command have any acquisition authority? Or will you continue with today's current and, sometimes, quite frankly, slow requirement process? Either one, if you want to address
I'll
that.
start on this. So first, I think we both said in our opening comments, part of this is streamlining some of our, it doesn't make, necessarily having a whole bunch of headquarters doesn't make things go faster. I would argue that, streamlining that will help. There's a couple of things we're doing. This will really help, I think, on the requirements process, because right now we have all these different functions that are trying to do similar things in two commands, and we need to combine those together. So that's one aspect of it. But it also gets to changing how our processes. One of the things, for example, that we've done with our next-gen command and control is rather than give a 250-page requirements document, we're basically explaining a characterization of need. We're saying, hey, here's the problem we need industry to solve. And we went out there, and there's a consortium of those tech industries that were able to help us do that. That's one aspect of it. The other is that we have to put users and developers together inside of our formations. That's another thing we're doing, so that you have engineers, smart people that know how to solve these problems with robots or drones. They're right inside of our formations, and they're seeing, the problems that our soldiers are facing. So I would say it's a combination of things, and I think combining these headquarters will help us to streamline that. It's also going to get more of our leaders back down into our fighting formations, which is something that I know everybody wants.
And Congressman, just anecdotally, to kind of tell a real-world example of how we're trying to think about things differently. Chief and I visited the West Coast and went to a tech company that makes autonomous software for vehicles. And we said, have you ever tested this on a military vehicle? And they said, no, we can't wait the couple of years to get it. There's too much paperwork. There are too many forms. And we basically worked with the team to get them a Humvee and an infantry squad vehicle within about a week. And they said, well, what do you want us to do with it? And we said, well, just do anything you can do to it in 10 days and send us a video. So they sent us a video. They had fully automated it. They had tied it in with drones. They had made it so you could repair it with the manual that they had uploaded to a screen remotely. And then they sent us this video, and we thought, this is incredible. We got to get it in the hands of soldiers. So we put it on a shipping truck and instantly drove it to JRTC. And this morning I woke up to a video of soldiers testing this new system. The entire time from start to in the hands of soldiers was about 6 weeks. And so what we're hoping to do is basically capture these lessons in real time. We don't know that it's a good idea or not, but we know that we'll know in about a week if it's a good enough idea to invest some more resources. And I think the merger of these two commands, the intent is to empower soldiers that are currently stovepiped to work together to do these things at scale across the formations.
Thank you. The Striker is sometimes referred to as the Army Swiss Army knife, and it's the most deployed combat vehicle with more than 30 million miles and 23 current deployments. What's your, and I'll give this question to you, Secretary Driscoll, what's your assessment of the Striker vehicle, and could you speak to the Army's plans for future production regarding it?
Congressman, I think that the Striker adds a lot of value to moving our soldiers around. I think what we've seen in Ukraine is with the Striker, you probably couldn't get too close to the front line without a relatively cheap drone being able to take that platform out of service. It is a massive value to the Army as we operate on land with people to be able to reposition our people. And so there are currently no plans to change how we think about the Striker. But I think one of the things that we have tried to flag to the entire formation and in our letter is this is an iterative process. We view this transformation, what you have quoted today for the ATI, as just the first phase. It may be 1 month later, 6 months later, or a year later that we come back to this committee and say, here's what we've learned. We think we need to do this next batch of changes. And so, because it's all going to be, how do we create the right mixture of assets and tools and training so that we can be ready for the next battlefield, which could show up anywhere in the world?
Can I make a quick comment on that?
Please.
Because the Striker, having been a division commander, having deployed in, with these formations, is a great system. And, we have it, and we're going to do some consolidation of some of those that are at Fort Carson. I do think that they have a role to play really around the world. We're using them for for counter UAS systems. They're great for command and control systems. So I think we see a part in them. But again, this is not just that every formation has to have them. I think we're trying to figure out, is to the Secretary's point, what's exactly the right mix that we need to be able to respond when our country calls on us. And that's, that's what we owe.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank the gentleman. Judge Carter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I want to thank you both for coming to my office and talking to me about this week and last week regarding the Army's modernization directive, especially the discussion of merging Army's future command with TRADOC. As you know, my biggest concern is enabling the bureaucracy that has delayed acquisition over the years. We got to move faster. And we've got to be moved faster to be lethal. And we don't want to enable people who keep us from getting what we need to the battlefield. And I love what you're saying so far. So can you explain to me how merging Futures Command with TRADOC will decrease the bureaucracy's ability to slow down and allow us to streamline, to acquire technology at a place that is relevant.
I'll start on that. So, our plan right now is we're going to, it'll be the Army's Transformation and Training Command. It will stay, the primary headquarters, Congressman, down in Austin, technical hub. We like what's down there, as far as the culture, the software factory, the ideas for innovation and change. But a lot of these changes are also going to occur inside that command that have to happen at the Combined Arms Center at Leavenworth, at the Centers of Excellence. And I mentioned it earlier when your colleague, was asking about it, where I think we can combine and move things and consolidate, some of our form and function that we have at some of those places as well, like Fort Sill or Fort Benning. The other thing that we are looking to do is to automate a lot of our processes. And I think I've mentioned this to you, when I can go to a smart board in my office rather than asking questions, and I can immediately see the data. So some of this is changing our processes and how we're doing that. And last thing I'd mention, the Secretary mentioned this, we've had a lot of whiteboard sessions here on how we would, we're going to move this at speed. And so I do think, we have to transform faster, and we're going to have to figure out how we can buy things on a much more rapid, modular open system architecture, and we're working on that as well.
And Congressman, we have approximately 35,000 people that are in our acquisitions. We don't know what the right number is. That is too many. What ends up occurring is you just have so many human beings involved that everything gets slowed down. There are just required, and these are our own. This is not blaming anyone but ourselves. We have got to cut through some of these layers so that the feedback loop between the actual soldier testing the thing, getting that learning, or testing or using it in actual combat, getting that learning into our system and getting that to the software developer or the manufacturer to get the next prototype out, to get the next thing in the field, is what has made American innovation so strong in the last 20, 25 years. These venture capital models for how they back companies to test, innovate, learn, grow, and repeat again and again and again until they hit scale. We, the Army, need to do it, and we're hopeful that we're taking the first steps.
Well, amen on that one. That needs to be done. The acceleration of the programs like the Futures Long Range Assault Aircraft and the M1E3 highlight the growing need for modernization of infrastructure. Is the AIT initiative making the necessity investments to support these platforms? And do you believe that we can build an infrastructure quickly enough to meet the pace of modernization?
I can take the Flora, and then Chief, you want to hit the M1E3. So the Flora aircraft, the rotary wing helicopter, is an amazing innovation that I think we, the Army, need. It is an example, I think, of our own systems and failures getting in the way. When they showed me the aircraft and said how fast it went and how far it went, it clearly will add capabilities that could be relevant in Indo-PACOM. But when I asked, well, when did the first test flight occur? And I think it was 2017 or 2018, my stomach sank that it had been 7 years since we think we had found what we needed, but we hadn't transitioned to it. We hadn't figured out a path for it. It was kind of just at this stalled place. And so we do think that Flora and with the ATI, that is probably our future. And so we are actively working on a plan and trying to sync with Pentagon leadership, Secretary of Defense, and the Deputy Secretary to move that forward as quickly as possible.
Yeah, just really quick, Congressman, on the tank, is fully digitized. So again, Secretary mentioned, having a platform that's basically enabled by software. That's what this would be. Diesel, hybrid, electric. So, half the fuel costs, again, reducing the logistics that are on there. Modular, so you can add active protection. So people talk about drones. You could update the active protection system on this, and this whole system could be rapidly updated. What we would like to have is next year, and I think we could move this, this fast on this, is actually have some of those new tanks inside of our formation and get, and have our soldiers given feedback on that and what we need to do. And I think we have to approach these different. I've always talked, program or record should be a little bit different. We have to build things that are modular and can be adapted and updated because that's the world we're living in.
And one more quick question. I've got a little bit more time. Mr. Cuellar asked a question about the border. Historically, our mission on the border was don't shoot back. Unless they shoot at you and kill or hurt an American soldier, then you can shoot back. Now, if they're using a drone to knock down something important to us, why can we use our drone to knock their drone down? There's no human interaction there. No human being is dying. Are we still going to have to be fired at before we fire back? If they send a drone over the border to mess with us, can't we shoot it down? What do you know about that policy? Because historically, that's been the policy on the border. Our military can't shoot back.
Yeah, I'm going to have to come back to you on the specifics on that. I know we have made some requests, and they've come up on the 130I that is law on what we can do and what we can't do when it comes to drones and how we share information and what we can do. So we'll come back with you on the specifics on
Let me know,
that.
because it doesn't make sense. There's no human being dying from if they send a drone over to knock it down. And if they knocked ours down, why can't we knock theirs down?
What I don't think has changed, if anybody feels like they're a threat, if they're being threatened, again, this gets back to that basic ROE. But I think your question is more broad. If you see anything flying that's out there, and we'll follow up with you on that.
Yeah, and remember that drug stuff that they're bringing across the border is killing more people than our soldiers are killing. Okay, so that's really important to think about. If they got free will to send drones over with drugs, we ought to be able to shoot them down. And I'll yield back.
Thank you, Chairman. Or thank you, Judge. I appreciate it. One point you made, I want to reemphasize this. How many people do you in the Army have in the acquisition program?
Approximately 35,000.
That's just the United States Army.
That is just the United States.
That is a combination of acquisition, sustainment, engineers that do development. So I think there's around, if you're like talking purely acquisition professionals, I think that's somewhere around 5,000. I mean, I can get back with you, but it's a program that we have that's in sustainment, and this gets to why some of these things that we want to stop. There becomes, it's sustainment as well.
Let's just say it's 5,000 just in the Army. So I make an assumption here that you have a significant number in the Navy, you have a significant number in the United States Air Force, you have a significant number. I'm going to ask the question, Mr. Womack's here. I suspect, how many people do you think is an acquisition in the entire corporation of Walmart?
If you ask the leadership at Walmart and the shareholders, they probably say too many, but not that many.
I was just curious. Mr. Diaz-Balart.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And first, gentlemen, Mr. Secretary General, thank you for your service. And I hope you know that when we say that, we mean it. It's such a crucial role that you play and those that you represent. I love what you're trying to do. I really do. I think it's important. You've mentioned why you're doing it. We know the problem. It's a frustration that we've had, and Congress can be part of the problem. We know that. One of the issues is it's kind of the chicken and the egg. One of the problems that we have as members of Congress is sometimes there has not been a lot of confidence necessarily in making sure that the money that we send is going to be used for things that are really important. And again, we're part of that problem. I get that, a big part of that problem. But let me just throw a couple of potential issues. For example, sole source contracts, which can be hugely necessary and important, but sometimes you kind of wonder. And I just want to throw something out there. There may be a good explanation, but this Vital Torso Protection Program, that there were, my understanding, a number of potential vendors
And then it was, in essence, I believe, sole sourced to 2, and yet it's a almost, over $400 million program over 7 years. There may be a good reason for that, but that's the kind of thing that we see, and it's like, whoa, what's going on here? And I know it's precisely the kind of things that you guys are looking at. So I would just like, if you could, and there's other examples of that, like the low altitude stalking and strike ordnance, LASSO program, right? The sole source, loitering ammunitions. I believe it's almost $1 billion over 5 years. Again, there may be good reasons for it, but I would really love if you can just get back to us on, for example, on those two and others that you might see out there. That is there a real urgent reason to sole source it? Is it saving us money? Is it urgent? And if it is urgent, why is it for 7 years or 5 years? And so those are the kind of questions, and I know you all are trying to get to as well. So if you could just get back to me on some of those issues as to, are you looking at them? I'm assuming that you are, because you're looking at ways to be more efficient in saving money. Another issue, for example, and again, I'm sure there's a good reason for it, but when we're looking at saving money, and I think you guys are doing an amazing job, I think something like modeling and simulation in training is something that, logic would say, if done right, could save money and could be very effective. My understanding is that the Army is planning to eliminate, and I see if I get this right, PEO STRI, which I had thought was a potential massive cost-saving entity. And so any idea of how you would ensure that continues, that innovation in the training continues if that's eliminated? I don't know if you have that answer now, and I don't expect you have all these answers, but if you can get back to me on these issues, to be fair, because obviously I'm throwing these at you a little bit of cold here, but those are issues that would be very helpful to me if you can get back to me on those issues.
I just want to mention on both of them. So first, we agree with you on, long-term programs. I think you heard me say earlier about program of record. We shouldn't be buying something and saying, hey, we're locked in for 7 years and this is what we got to buy, given how much, things are going to change. So we'll follow up with you on those. On the PEO STRI, I actually spent a year as a young infantry major working in simulations, and in my view, the gaming industry, everything that we're doing. So it isn't just a matter of having, I think we have a lot of changes that need to occur, I will tell you, down there. And I'm very familiar with that. I can come talk to you about that. But this is another idea of things that we need to change, how we operate, and the companies that we're working with. When I was running a warfighter as a division and a corps commander, it took 800 people, basically our soldiers, as training aides. We can't afford to do that. There is technology out there that right now that we can ingest into our system and make sure that we're training, and that's what we want to build. And we haven't, gotten that. So I do think we need to make some major changes down there.
And again, I love the fact, it's really, to me, it's refreshing to see your attitude of just, kind of not just content with the status quo, which we know has created some issues on lethality and again, just of being able to access technology, et cetera. So I love what you guys are doing, but if you can get back to me on those, I would greatly appreciate it.
And Congressman, the only thing I would say is I appreciate your graciousness saying there's probably a good reason for why we're doing those things. There may not be. And what we are trying to do is reset the culture of the Army so that when we look, if there is not a good reason or the reason changed, to tell you in this committee and work with you to fix it. And then specifically the simulations, one of the things we saw on that same West Coast trip, this is the perfect example of the private industry, and some of our largest companies have invested tens of billions of dollars into simulation tools and software. The United States Army should not be in the business of trying to compete with that. We should be taking what exists and figuring out how does this help soldiers. And so what we are trying to do is work hand in hand with those companies to say, they have created these new metaverses. How do we train there?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Elzey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for being here. Secretary Driscoll, I just want to point out that I don't know how you're doing what you're doing. I know you're the ATF chief acting right now. Your wife works. You got 2 small children, and I appreciate what you're doing. And I'd also like to point out that in 1981, Ronald Reagan appointed a then 38-year-old John Lehman to transform the Navy into a 600-ship Navy, and I think you're the perfect guy based on your background, your history, your service, to transform the Army in collaboration with the Chief of Staff in a way that we haven't seen before, and you're the right guy at the right time. And of course, General George, your service, I think you are as transformative as General Berger in the Marine Corps, and what you're doing right now is absolutely the right thing to do. You know, we've talked about emerging technologies, DIU, your collaboration with those kinds of groups, and getting out of our own way at the Pentagon. And as I often say, the Pentagon should be turned into a triangle at least. We need to lock a whole bunch of those doors and send a lot of people out to the fleet and out into the field again to get back to fighting instead of getting in our way. The rice bowl that is the Pentagon is not the problem of the contractors or it's the chiefs of staff or the COCOMs. It's the mid-level folks that are there that have been doing it for 20 years, whose job security relies on having something bad to say about a program that's being built, which is why the Army's canceled so many programs in the past, because what started out as a good idea got too big and too heavy and too expensive until it dies on under its own weight. So I want to help you guys do what you're needing to do. And I would like to point out, as we transition to the fight in the Pacific, which is what everybody here believes is the next fight, which is what the President believes, it's SecDef believes. He's issued memos to say transition to the Pacific, a vast sea space run by the Indo-PACOM, my friend Pappy Paparo. It's not a small place. You can't get there at 130 knots. You can't get there at 130 knots. So the Marine Corps, in order to get to the fight, needs to get to the V-22. By the way, the mishap rate is less than that of the H-53, the AV-8B, and the F-18. That doesn't prevent people from talking bad about it and saying it's a troubled program. It's mature and it's ready to go. The Army's not going to get in the fight unless they have the FLRAA. The Air Force isn't going to get to the fight until they have the F-47, and the Navy's not going to be in the fight appropriately until it has the F/A-XX. So I want to ask you, General, do you feel good about tilt rotor technology? Is it mature enough for you to take the FLRAA on and into battle, future long-range attack aircraft?
I do, Congressman, and that is, I think we both said this up front, is I think that is a much-needed system inside the Army. I think that it is, 350 miles an hour at a 350-mile range. That is a significant difference. It can be optimally manned, which means it could also fly autonomously. You can connect that with drones. There's a lot of things that you can do with that system. We could use it around the world, not just I think it's critically important in the Indo-PACOM. And I think that this is also something that SOCOM is going to want to be able to use. So I think all the services would use that. So we want to get it moving as fast as possible.
And Congressman, with FLRAA, we met with the company that built it last week, and what we wanted to partner with them and task them with is spend this week and create a plan and tell us, how do you push it forward by years? And then what do we, the Army, need to do to help you? And so one of the things when we talked to Deputy Secretary of Defense Feinberg that he and we have gotten so excited about is we do not intend to sit back passively as they begin this manufacturing process. If you think about what had helped us during our world wars is we put soldiers in factories, and we intend with FLRAA, we are going to be a part of the process, and we are going to be cutting through the red tape and doing our part as the United States Army to push it forward and get in the hands of soldiers.
Thank you. Well, I think Defense Department-wide, we see a bunch of folks at the Pentagon who are getting in the way. From my service, NAVAIR and NAVC. NAVC has gotten in the way of the LSM that's going to allow the Marines to fight, and it's gone to 10 times as expensive and 5 years away from being produced when we can get it right off the line, off the shelf, so to speak, out of plants in Mississippi or shipyards in Mississippi. We have NAVAIR getting in the way of your program at FLRAA, as well as making some mistakes with V-22. So I think we're all united in the folks in the Pentagon who are preventing you from helping the COCOMs man, train, and equip their troops need to be very fearful about their jobs in the future, because we won World War II without NAVAIR, NAVC, without the minions, and it's time to get back to that. So we're more responsive to the warfighter and the COCOMs and get these exquisite technologies on the field faster. So thank you all for being here. I yield back.
Just, I love the question, Mr. Elsie, on the FLRAA. How quickly do you think you can get FLRAA at full production, and what would you define as full production? How many units a year?
Chairman, I'll take the first half and give it to General George. We owe you follow-up to this. We originally were intending to put it into our ATI document that came out. We don't feel like we're in a position quite yet to answer this question, but we think within a matter of weeks, we will have a very clear plan that we can come pitch you as a committee or a subcommittee that you can help us look at and be able to react to.
I just, and Sec Army said this, I think we're, broadly moving this up, several years, like, into the 2028 timeframe is what we're looking at. We're just figuring out what we can do by working with them on how we can pull it as far left. What we've also talked about doing is getting some initial systems inside of our formations. That's what we're trying to do right now. You get feedback directly, what are the things that we need to do differently. So we'll come back and follow up with you in detail.
Thank the gentleman. Mr. Lauro.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member, and my colleagues. I apologize. It's a day filled with hearings. There are 5 of them, and this is 3. So, but I really wanted to be here today. Let me just say, first of all, I represent the 3rd District of Connecticut. And Connecticut has historically been known as the arsenal of democracy. So these are issues that are very critically important to me. We make the finest aircraft in the world, including the Black Hawk, which is manufactured at Sikorsky in Stratford, Connecticut, which I represent. You all know this. It's the Army's vertical lift platform, par excellence. Versatility, safety, effectiveness. Our soldiers know it wherever I travel, overseas, etc. I always ask about the Black Hawk, and our service people, our soldiers sing its praises. So because of this, the Black Hawk will play an integral role in Army aviation operations for decades to come. Secretary Driscoll, does this assessment of the Black Hawk's capabilities and importance sound right to you?
Congresswoman, directionally, yes, with the disclaimer being, again, if we look at all of our platforms and all of our systems, the right mixture of what we need in the future, we are learning these lessons daily and want to share them with you, your office, and this subcommittee. And so the problem with an all Black Hawk formation would be it cannot go far enough and fast enough to survive in some parts of the world, like Indo-PACOM, like your colleague referenced. And so we do think that for the next sizable portion of time, the Black Hawk will be part of the mix, though.
Well, I just want to be sure that you're talking about a key piece of the puzzle, the Black Hawk for the future of the Army, given that has a cumulative 5 million combat hours, flown critical missions in diverse theaters and conditions. I think it is a critical tool, and I hope you agree with me that that is the case with the Black Hawk.
I agree.
Okay. So you noted in your testimony that the Army must remain agile, able to adapt to new challenges. I agree with that. The Black Hawk is adaptable not just in field but technologically as well, with Army and industry having recognized the need to modernize key systems on the Black Hawk to ensure that it continues to work for the future. And I've had many conversations, all in the affirmative of making sure that the modernization of the Black Hawk continues. I would like to hear more about your forward-looking vision for the Black Hawk. How will the Black Hawk's utilization change and grow in the coming years? How does the Black Hawk factor into the Army's new transformation initiative?
Congresswoman, I appreciate that your constituency involves Black Hawk and the Americans who have made it. Our constituency is the American soldier and the taxpayer whose dollars we spend.
Let me just interrupt for 1 second. It's not just a constituency issue here, though it's very, it is. It is about the Black Hawk and what it has meant to the safety of our soldiers and the national security of this country. That is my primary goal in addressing this issue. This is not just willy-nilly a constituent question. This is overall the national security of this nation and the role and, quite frankly, the promise of a modernization of the Black Hawk, and that it will be a major piece going forward. So I'm sorry to interrupt you, so please, please continue.
I'll comment a little bit.
Please.
I've been, in the Army for close to 40 years. I've been flying on Black Hawks, got a lot of hours on the Black Hawk. It's a great aircraft. I think that right now what we want to do is actually we are going to take some of the older Black Hawks out of our formations, the Lima and Victor models. We have updated to the Mike model. We continue to upgrade. We have to upgrade all of our aviation to make sure that they can defend themselves, understand threats. So those kinds of things will continue to happen. I think the Secretary said we're going to continue to have Blackhawks. I will tell you that what we are looking, that there are ways that you can build, like for example, I do think I see drones in the future being able to pick up and actually move artillery tubes. We've done that with Blackhawks in the past, and I've been on artillery raids with those. So I think that there's other things that are going to change on the battlefield. I see Blackhawks are going to be with us for a while, but I do think we're going to have to adapt what we're doing. There just may be less Blackhawks.
This is very, very troubling, because the overall commitments and conversations with the Army over the last year, including when they weren't part of the modernization piece going forward, that the Black Hawk would be a singular, not singular in that there's nothing else out there, but that modernization of the Black Hawk and providing the multi-year contracts. So I'm going to ask you this question, but again, very, very troubling as to your comments on, not reassuring those of us who have had this commitment about where the Black Hawk stands in our national security and its modernization and the investment in that modernization for the future. And I can give you a chapter and verse of conversations that I've had over the last year about the Black Hawk helicopter. But that then gets me to multi-year contracts.
I'm not aware that we're making any adjustment to the Black Hawk contract. What I was basically describing you is how I see the battlefield evolving and how I would see us being able to do things. So you were asking me if, future, it's hard to predict.
Again,
but we know we have autonomous systems that can do. That's what we were talking about.
That is troubling, because folks who preceded you were very, very clear about the role of the Black Hawk going forward in the future. So, again, I'll have a continued conversation about this. But that gets me to, the Army needs stability. Our workers need stability here. Multi-year contracts for the Black Hawk have been delivered. They generated significant savings for the government. Now, again, I'm concerned that if the current multi-year contract is allowed to expire in 2026 without any certainty around the next steps, that the industrial base is not going to be able to pick up and move back. So let me just ask you clearly about a multi-year contract to ensure that there is no gap in production that threatens our readiness.
I mean, I wouldn't. I think we're going to have to come back and talk to you, Congresswoman. I'm not sure I would, make a commitment.
You can't
I wouldn't make a commitment to say that we're going to build things, the same thing forever. We have to come back and look at that. Obviously, we'll have a discussion on that.
And Congresswoman,
I'm asking you about the 26 budget, multi-year contract.
I think we have, from what we have learned and what we have seen being around soldiers, I think we have had this conversation with many of our largest companies in the last week. We are unwilling to make commitments that are, in our opinion, in the best interest of soldiers and their lethality and keeping them safe if we deploy them anywhere in the world to bring them home. And so we can follow up with your office, but right now we can't answer that.
But we're going to need to have a conversation offline. Again, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member, this is a very, very troubling conversation, and I will produce the background and information that I've been given about the future of the Black Hawk for our national security and the modernization and investment in that modernization. So that I will yield back. I thank you for the opportunity to be here this morning, and I will put into the record if I can, because I also head up the aviation subcommittee here with a colleague on this committee, Congressman Strong, and we need to have answers about that. But this is very, very troubling, and I'll get back to you, but you need to get back to me. We need to have a serious conversation about going forward and what this budget will look like for 2026. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, gentlelady. Mr. Joyce.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and gentlemen, welcome. Secretary Driscoll, I want to follow up on a little bit here what my colleague had brought up before when you talk about things falling behind. I used to be the chair of Homeland. We needed icebreakers, and guess what? We produce maybe 1.2 a year while we need 7. So I asked this question, and I really truly appreciate that your commitment to developing this next generation of combat vehicles. However, the thing that I'm concerned about is that the industrial capacity to build these things in the future, while you let go of some things and you move in one direction, God forbid we get to war, we have to have the ability to do those, be able to produce the things that are necessary for our men and women to fight. So does the Army have a strategic plan to ensure that we do not lose the critical workforce and combat vehicle industrial capacity as we develop this Army of the future?
Congressman, one of the things we're trying to do as an Army is when we talk about demand signal, I think what we have not done a particularly strong job of is we, the Army, have stayed siloed oftentimes, and when we signal to our industry what we need and to allow them to spend the CapEx to build out the manufacturing facilities so they know they can get a return on those dollars, to train the workforce, to have a happy, sustainable, expert workforce that innovates. All of that requires predictability, and we, the Army, partially based off how our funding works, but partially just based off we've done a poor job in the past, can be better. And one of the ways we can be better is by looking to our allies. And so what we've actively been doing is reaching out to NATO countries to say, what do you want and need from the American industry? How do we bundle that together with what we want and need? And so even if we have inconsistent demand over time, we have a pretty good sense of what we'll need in the medium and long term. Those allies can smooth out that demand to allow that investment that we need. Because to your point, Congressman, we think if we get into a long, protracted conflict, it will be our ability to manufacture at scale that will be the Army's, one of its primary functions is to be able to deliver that to the fight. And so we are hyper-focused on it, and we think what we dream of is that these changes that we're talking about today will unlock a renaissance in the industrial base so that small and medium businesses across America, venture-backed and not, can all thrive in the new environment.
Well, that's great. I know when I've had the pleasure of attending CODELs with our chairman throughout the world, he's always brought that to attention that allies help allies, and we all need to work together. Brings me to my next question. And given your emphasis on creating a competitive industrial base early on, and the fact that you want to use the private sector to compete and help you to get to where you need to go, early on in this hearing, your willingness to assess existing contracts for continuation based upon the impact of the mission. Will you also assess past sole source contract awards to ensure that you're taking into account all competitive options and maximize your use of the industrial base?
Absolutely. We are trying to do a top-down review of everything we can and work with this subcommittee and the other bodies of government leadership to empower you with the information that we see. This is a collaborative process. Democracy works best when there's tension in all directions. That should give us the best outcomes. And so we are actively reviewing everything and look forward to sharing it with you.
Great, thank you. General, could you please walk us through the process that you undergo, the Army undergoes, when you're considering whether to pursue a competitive or a sole source contract through the procurement process, and what criteria does the service consider as part of this process?
I'm trying to think of an example. Obviously what we do on the military side is we describe the requirements and we talk about what we need. There's an acquisition executive that goes through and a contracting officer. The only thing I could think of is if you need it for a short period of time and there was only, somebody who could, one person that could produce that and could meet the timeline that would do that. So I know there was an example of a 7-year, I'm not specifically aware of that. We can certainly come back to you on that. But broadly, what we've been talking about is we want competition. We want as many, it's why I keep coming back to program of record is probably not, like especially when you're talking drones and loitering munitions and all these things, you want as many people involved with the process as you possibly can, because that's when American industry gets moving. And we've seen that with drones and a lot of the other systems, and that's where we need to be.
Do you have any suggestions for how the Army's, through their procurement and acquisition process, that'll help drive this innovation and maintain America's competitive advantage over our adversaries?
Yeah, I just mentioned one thing that the Secretary and I, and it gets back to, his earlier comment on how we are structured. I think there's a lot of technology right now that you could adopt. So does the program manager shop doesn't need to be a bunch of people, because it's dual use, it's stuff you can get right off the shelf, network, drones, things like that. There's other things that you can modify we use the example of the infantry squad vehicle. GM Defense makes that. We make modifications to it it's based on a Chevy Colorado. So that's a modified, and then I think there's other ones that are developed. So I just think we have to approach this a little bit different. Again, those are things that we haven't done in a while, and it can't be one size fits all in the current environment that we're in.
And Congressman, when General George and I speak about these things with the leadership team, we try to bifurcate the Army as a business and the Army as a warfighting machine. And one of the things we're most proud of, that started well before my tenure, is if you look as an example at how we're doing recruiting and capturing the data of our future soldiers, the way we would have done in the past is we would have said, here is our process. We need a software developer to go build us a specific thing, and then we need developers to keep it up and going, and it's our own proprietary thing, and it's expensive and it's clunky, and that's how we've done in the past. What we've done with recruiting now is the command looked out at the best CRMs available in the marketplace. Then it took our Army process and rearranged it to match what was already in the market, and then we bought a software license like a medium or large size business would do, and we have seen incredible results. It's a lot cheaper, it's a lot faster, it's a better experience for the soldiers who are doing the recruiting and the incoming future soldiers. And what we're trying to do is take those Army as a business functions and run them like a business.
I love that idea, because one thing you find around here is a lot of sole source technology and IP contracts that people have burrowed in over the years. It doesn't mean we're getting the best, but it means somebody's got a good job for a long period of time. So I love the idea of the competition. With that, I'm well over past my time. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Joyce. Mr. Valadeo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Secretary Driscoll and General George, for testifying before the committee today. Your leadership is vital to preparing our soldiers and meet the evolving needs of our warfighter. First question is, as the Army transitions infantry brigade combat teams to more mobile formations, how will you ensure soldier protections in that process, particularly as field infantry squad vehicles that offer significantly less armor than legacy platforms like the high mobility, multi-purpose wheeled vehicles and joint light tactical vehicles?
So I think we're actually, part of this, I used to make this argument when I would go to Afghanistan. So I went from Iraq to Afghanistan. Everybody told me you had to wear heavy body armor, groin protector, all these extra things that I was wearing, and actually it was, very difficult to move. So I think every situation is going to be a little bit different. What we're going to do in the mobile brigade combat teams, I think there's going to be autonomous systems that are in there that can see out. That's both ground and air. So you can use those same autonomous systems. We were just out at our National Training Center where they're actually autonomous systems which you want to put in contact first that can do breaching, change detection that you can see as far as the earth is being changed, that you can get with drones and using AI. So, and I think there's different ways of doing it. Putting yourself in a complete shell. I mean, the problem with some of those vehicles too is they're not very mobile. They get stuck. When you get stuck, you're also a target. So I think it's a mix, and that's what we're looking at inside of our formations. Last and most importantly is the feedback that we get from our troops that are actually doing this, that are inside there. We're getting ready to go out to Joint Readiness Training Center. Here, actually, the brigade is doing their air assault tonight. It's our fourth rotation of this. We have adjusted this structure. We'll continue to do this. This is why we talk about continuous transformation, but I think we're on a good path.
And Congressman, I would just say, back to the right balance. We don't know what it is, the trade-off between the security of extra armor versus speed. I think a lot of, and so it would be ideal, or it would be smoother for a conversation to say there were these very binary outcomes of what we were optimizing for. We're not, but what we are trying to do is balance out what we've purchased for coin. So if you think of our purchases in the last 20 years, we have purchased or over-purchased a lot of equipment that now needs to be balanced out with new, more digital, faster things. And so our purchasing may look like it's a binary. We are going toward only faster, but we know that we already have a lot of this other equipment in our arsenal.
Thank you. You've stated the Army's transformation will be cost neutral, relying on divestments and command streamlining. But are these trade-offs sustainable over the long term, especially as new systems like drones, long-range fires, and cyber capabilities introduce their own life cycle costs for training, sustainment, and modernization?
I think, you know, we have this conversation almost daily about cost curve. I mean, and that's what we're looking at is what do we do, you know, to reduce cost. A big part of this is on a lot of these systems, they need to be modular, and you need to be able to change things out. A lot of times it's the software, so you have to, you know, we have to own our IP. We have to own, you know, it has to fit into our command and control systems. So again, this is about how we buy things from the beginning so that we make sure that we're reducing the cost on a lot of these things. The drones that we have from the first rotation to our most recent one have gotten better, and they've also gotten cheaper. We're also building some of those things. So I think that there's a lot of areas, you know, ways that we can keep costs down. And we do have to get in the habit of things that we know don't work or we don't need, getting rid of those as well.
And Congressman, one of the other places we as the Army have been a bad customer, we have both been a bad customer oftentimes to who our suppliers are. We've also been a bad customer to ourselves. And so we have signed away our right in some instances to repair our equipment. And one of the things that Secretary of Defense Hegseth mandated to us in the memo that we are incredibly supportive of is we cannot allow outside parties to constrain our ability to repair our own equipment. So when General George and I were doing some of our tours and spending time with soldiers, you would see this exquisite piece of equipment that had been on the sideline for 9 to 12 months at a time. And we know how to 3D print the part. The part costs between $2 and $20, and it was at scale. And so one of the other things we're trying to do with our current innovation and transformation is to start to take care of ourselves better and be more thoughtful about how to be stewards of the American taxpayers' dollars.
I appreciate that. And then how will the Army ensure that small businesses with innovative and readily available artificial intelligence tools can contribute to the Army's artificial intelligence ecosystem?
Artificial intelligence and these models that are out there, these generative AI models are incredible. And when I joined, I would have thought that there would be more places that we could start to use them. I think today, as we sit here before you, we have a couple of places within our mostly special forces where they can apply some of that. But until we get this data layer that syncs our people and our things and our sensors and allow the information to be exchanged quickly, generative AI probably won't be showing up into the kind of our formations in combat for at least a couple of quarters, but we're very optimistic that with the steps we're taking for command and control, that we might be able to come back next year and say, generative AI models are transforming how we're thinking about targeting and all of these other functions of war.
My time's expired, so thank you very much.
Thank you, gentlemen. Ms. McCollum.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have a question for you in general at the end, but I'm going to submit for the record to understand better what I've been reading about how and why you use non-disclosure agreements in the Army. We want to, just to remind you, we want to follow up cost on the southwest border issue versus what you might be having to sacrifice for your role in China Indo-Pacific. I'm going to follow up also with a question on the Arctic, and I will be asking this of everyone: workforce and the reductions in the way that is transforming, and your discussions about taking 90,000 people out of active duty. So it's been an interesting discussion today. But gentlemen, I noticed when reading your testimony, and even in some of the questions here, There are several changes that you're proposing for the Army, but the Congress needs to be involved in this, and this was not mentioned in your testimony, and I'm sure it was not an oversight. You just assumed that we knew you were going to do that, but I think we need to hear from you you're going to do that. Because in October 2022, the Army announced the new transformation plan of Army, 2030. And so now, what is that looking like? Because in your plan for 2030 was described as budget-informed, multi-year plan, prioritizing people and balancing warfighting readiness, aligning equipment, organizations, training, and evolving threats by major competition, which is at the heart of what you've been talking about here today. But if you were going to shift to a model that empowered theaters and the Corps to work with other services and allies and partners and deliver logistic support, yet we know that there was an I'm going to say unintentional, I don't assume the worst of people, an unintentional failure, a big one, to notify the Marine Corps what you were doing with one of your cancellations because it's part of a joint. So you want to adjust the procurement process. We get that. You've asked for agile funding proposals, but we don't, the 24 baseline we're working off is a CR. We don't have the spend plan yet for 25. We don't have the budget for 26. You're talking about getting back to us as we're marking up. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done. So we're going to need a lot of information from you, justification documents for what you want to do. That needs to be communicated to the Hill and to us. So to kind of sum up, where is 2023 fit in with agile funding proposal? We want to hear how you're going to work with Congress, with this committee, the Senate committee, even the authorizers, how you're going to be working with everyone, because you might need authorization on some of this. So if you can get back to us, your communication plan, as well as your spend plan, that would be greatly appreciated. Mr. Chair, thank you for giving me the opportunity to ask that question.
Thank you. Thanks, gentlelady. Mr. Quare, you have a special guest you want to introduce?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, ranking member, thank you so much, members. I want to, Mr. Secretary General, I want to introduce a young man and his, live in Laredo, live less than a mile from the river. They're from Laredo. Santiago is here with his Cárdenas and his mother. And if I can just introduce him, there's a very special story, but I'll say it later, but just want to have Santiago and his mother and his godmother stand up on that. He is congressman for the day, so he'll be voting much better. Thank you so much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And I want to thank the Secretary, General George, for your testimony today. Obviously, a lot of changes taking place. We want to work with you. We're all on the same team. And to make sure this transformation is done well. And with that, we are adjourned.